Welcome back to the VR Aperture, your source for the most detailed news in virtual reality and reviews from an engineer's perspective. This week we have lots of awesome VR news for you. First off, PlayStation has filed for a patent for a PSVR Gen 2 visor, the future of VR lenses by Oculus, VR toys by Nintendo, and much, much more. I am Destroy Troy, and I will be your host of the Aperture. So starting off, some of you may or may not know that PlayStation 5 is slated for December 20. And those of you who own a PlayStation VR will be happy to know that the current VR visor will be compatible with the PlayStation 5. But if you decide you want to go full plaid and get a whole new visor system to go with it, PlayStation's patent for a Gen 2 visor has become publicly available. They will be building off their previous successes, and their new visor will likely look, feel, and function much like the previous visor, but with a few additions. The visor will still be tracked by a console camera. It'll still have the LEDs for tracking, but Sony has decided to include cameras into the visor, which is a very interesting move. It's projected to have 2 cameras in the front and 1 in the back, and also 1 in the Move controller. Given that the tracking will still operate by the console camera, it's interesting that they've decided to throw what seems to be inside-out tracking cameras into the visor. And though there's no clear explanation as to why Sony is deciding to do this, but if one were to speculate, and I'm going to go ahead and do so, the reason Sony is probably doing this is they have realized that the only way to go with VR tracking is with an external tracking system. Inside-out tracking has too many flaws with it. But what they appear to be doing here is a hybrid system. It's going to be the console camera plus inside-out tracking cameras. So you'll get the precision of an external tracking system with the ease of setup with an inside-out or single external tracking device at least. And Sony's probably also realized the big problem with inside-out tracking, or the 2 big problems with inside-out tracking, is controller occlusion. The system loses tracking of the controller anytime it goes behind the head or back, which is likely why they've included a camera in the rear, and occlusion when one controller eclipses another. So they've included a camera on the motion controller. And some systems don't regain that tracking as well as others. This hybrid system may be the way to go from here on forward. This is very exciting news because it may be the first step forward in VR tracking since the original Vive. But that's not all of the exciting news with the Gen 2 visor. The current visor does not have a pass-through view like the Cosmos or the Vive or the Valve or the Rift or the Quest does. I believe all of those do. But the current gen PlayStation VR does not. And so as part of the patent, it looks to be that they will be including a pass-through, but instead of using the front-mounted cameras, they're going to be using mirrors, which will allow an overlay in that view, so you can actually get an extra function as a mixed reality or augmented reality visor, much like, I guess, the HoloLens or smart glasses. So it'll be interesting if these rumors turn out to be true and how game developers choose to utilize it. And then there's even still more news. This visor is likely going to be wireless. It looks very likely according to the patent, but do understand that there's a trade-off with wireless visors in that with it being wireless, it'll also be self-powered, which means the visor will either be heavier to encompass a battery pack and also suffer from a short battery life, or be tethered to a waistband battery pack. Maybe not to the device, but you're still not going to be completely free of cables. Moving on, the future of lenses by Oculus. I cannot say enough about how important this is going to be. I mentioned in a previous video about eye tracking and foveated rendering and briefly about varifocal lenses. This I cannot say enough about. This is going to be the true breakthrough in virtual reality. It's going to give that real holodeck kind of experience, true 3D immersion. Once this hits the market, whoever develops it first, whether it be Oculus or someone else, that's going to be the visor to own. Let me explain why. Currently in VR, the human eye suffers from the divergence accommodation conflict. Our eyes have two features that help us focus on objects of varying distance. One is vergence, which is your eyes curving inward toward each other, depending on how close the object is to us. And then there's accommodation, where the lenses of our eyes actually bend to focus the light from the source on the retina at the back of your eye. When in VR and looking at a distant object, your eyes will adjust for vergence, but not for accommodation, because the source of the light is always the same distance away from your eyes. And being that these two features of your eyes always work in sync with each other, the fact that one is not working when the other is inside of VR is likely the biggest cause of discomfort in VR, but two, why we're not experiencing a more three-dimensional immersive experience. So to back up to the previous video, with eye tracking allows the possibility for varifocal displays, which means there may be a mechanism to overcome the vergence accommodation conflict. With eye tracking, the system can determine what the eye is focusing on, and using a motorized system, adjust the lenses in and out. Oculus has created two prototypes, Half Dome 1 and Half Dome 2, where they attempted this, but in Half Dome 3, the newest prototype, they've gone with an electronic method where they include a liquid crystal lens, and depending on when it's powered on, applies a magnification to your focal depth. In this prototype, they have 6 of these lenses, all of different magnifications, and when each one is turned on or in combination with each other, you get 64 layers of focal depth. If you check out the demonstration, which I'll try to provide in a link below in the description, you can see the actual smooth transition of focus on an object far away and then back on something close up, like how the human eye really works. And by using this electronic method instead of the motorized method, it completely eliminates all the motorized sounds and vibrations that are accompanied with it, the first two prototypes. And the package is much, much smaller in comparison. Moving on, Nintendo has decided to officially throw its hat into the ring of virtual reality with its Labo project. Other developers have attempted to create a VR experience for Nintendo, but without proper support from Nintendo, we're doomed to fail. So with this being an official Nintendo project, it's gonna be different this time. But the reason why I call it VR Toys is because this is what Nintendo has decided to go with. And this, and this, and this. This is their attempt to compete in the VR market. Questionable at best, I would say. So the design of this VR system, if you want to call it that, it is a variety of kits that support a variety of apps. But essentially all they are is a bunch of cardboard cutouts that you fold and assemble together yourself and then pop in this plastic enclosure which includes the lenses. They provide a variety of different kits, one being just a plain viewer, one that looks like a boxy bazooka in which you're looking through a virtual viewfinder, and a variety of other kits. And the idea is that you drop your Nintendo Switch into it, and then voila, you have a VR experience. It might seem like a neat idea. It looks terrible in my opinion, but it also is a terrible idea for a number of reasons. One, there's no tracking, so as you move your head around, it'll just be the same view moving with you. Not having the free motion will definitely be an area of discomfort if used in any period of time. Two, the Switch is actually a heavy device by mobile standards, and so you'll notice from the pictures there is no head mount or strap included, and so you're expected to hold it up, probably because it would be too heavy medically be sound idea, and so you hold it up yourself. If you notice, one of the kits, the Switch controllers are included, and you operate them while you hold the visor to your face, which if you had a hard enough time controlling Mario Kart at arm's length, imagine how it would be holding it up like this. Moving on, the Switch is only 720 resolution, and that's for the whole display, so it would be half of that, 360 per eye. Horrible resolution, and let me tell you, it would be screen door galore. You would see those individual pixels for sure. It would just be a bunch of traffic lights all lined up in your view. It seems that the majority of the fun with this will actually be with the assembling and designing of these different VR kits, but that the VR experience once assembled will be lacking, to say the least. The display for the Switch was never intended and will never be suited for a VR experience. And some other news, I'm extremely excited about this. I've been waiting for this a long time. The developers previously had a release date and then had to postpone it with nothing but a to be announced or a roughly fourth quarter due date, and that is Boneworks. For those of you who aren't familiar, Boneworks is a VR game, and that's really kind of an understatement. The developers have put quite an enormous amount of effort. The real achievement is in the physics of this game. They've tried to master every physical aspect of every object that you will encounter. So for comparison, let's say you're playing a zombie game and it's a hack and slash, and you're cutting up zombies and you're taking off an arm here and a leg there, but they always come off in a predefined place. It doesn't really represent where you're striking the zombie. Here in Boneworks, they attempt to make every object respond with the proper cause and effect that you would expect in real life. So when you slice a zombie arm up, it slices where you created the slice. You know, if you throw an object, it's gonna have and bounce off other objects around the room. They're all gonna react as you would expect. You may be wondering, well, what's the point of the game? There's not really the important part here. It's likely a kind of a shooter game, but I could see Boneworks being the engine that drives many other games in the future, since they have put in an exorbitant amount of time trying to facilitate this achievement, to the point to where I imagine they've been burning the midnight oil nights and weekends for months. So I'm very excited to see what their final result is from their hard work. I don't know if that's a very good explanation, but check out the trailer. I'm incredibly excited about this. I hope to do a review video for you on this when it releases. Two more pieces of VR news. I mentioned in a previous video the VR Skin, which is a haptic feedback system for your hands. There's a new attempt at a full hand haptic feedback system in their VR gloves. And unlike this VR skin, where it's a pneumatic system and it's going to need an air compressor and hoses and attachments, this is a self-contained glove, very low profile, which includes a number of haptic sensors within, and I thought would be particularly exciting to use in conjunction with the index controllers. So you'll have a combination of the finger tracking, and then where the haptic feedback for the fingertips leaves off, these gloves will pick up. But unfortunately, it seems like they will only be available in a kit with their proprietary display, and will have a price tag of $650. So it's unlikely that anyone's going to be upgrading their current index kit with these gloves. And lastly in news, John Carmack has been awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award by the VR Awards for not only his contributions to Oculus, but for his decades of contributions in his attempt to bring VR to the mainstream. And then in a bizarre turn of events, 2 days later, after his acceptance speech, he turns around and says that he's moving on from VR and has decided that he'd rather be involved in artificial intelligence, which is very interesting move. They're like, oh yeah, great job you've done with VR. Like, yeah, I'm taking off. I'm out of here. I don't know. I find that funny. Anyways, that's all the news we have for you. We really appreciate you tuning in. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up. And if you'd like to support this channel, please subscribe. Once again, thank you for tuning in, and we hope you have a great rest of your week.